What would you do if the one person you trusted most walked into your home, took the most precious thing you owned, and returned it destroyed, then told you it was just a mistake? Would you forgive? Would you demand justice? Or would you risk tearing your family apart to defend what mattered most? The night the gown disappeared. I can still hear the silence of that night. The kind of silence that hums too loudly as though it's trying to tell you something's wrong. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't expecting betrayal. All I wanted was to fold the last of the laundry and slip it neatly into the guest closet before bed. Yet the moment I opened that closet door, the world as I knew it split in two. The garment bag was open. Empty. It doesn't sound terrifying, does it? An unzipped bag, a stretch of hanger without weight. But my body knew before my mind caught up. My heart plummeted, my palms slicked with sweat, and a trembling voice inside whispered, "This is impossible. It can't be gone." I ripped through hangers, pushed aside forgotten coats, bent down to search in the shadows of the floor. Nothing. The dress was nowhere. That wasn't just any dress. It was the single most precious possession I owned. It wasn't merely silk and lace. It was the memory of my wedding day, stitched together with fragments of my mother's and grandmother's gowns. A generational heirloom, reborn for me, passed forward with the promise that one day I might give it to a daughter of my own. To lose it wasn't just misfortune. It was devastation, theft, a knife into the fabric of my family. At first, I doubted myself. Maybe I had moved it. Maybe my husband, Sir Adam, had shifted it for some reason. I called him at work, voice shaking. His silence told me everything. He hadn't touched it. He was just as baffled as I was. That's when the panic bloomed into terror, a raw ache in my throat. There was only one other person with a key to our home. Beatrice, his younger sister. But surely no. She wouldn't. She couldn't. She'd been raised by Adam almost like a daughter, showered with support, given access to our home for study breaks, emergencies, moments of trust. Why would she reach into my closet and take the one thing she knew mattered most to me? Hours crawled past with no answer. I rang her phone. I sent message after message. Silence. Then, at last, a casual text. "Oh yeah, I borrowed that white dress in the closet. Hope you don't mind." Borrowed. That was the word she chose. Borrowed. I remember my knees giving out, the sound of my own voice breaking as I screamed through the phone. "Do you mean my wedding dress?" She paused, then laughed nervously. I didn't realize. I thought it was just an old gown. An old gown. The custom lace, the hand-stitching, the boutique garment bag, it all meant nothing to her. She dragged it to a Halloween party. "A costume," she said. "A costume." Hooked into my chest was a terrible question. What state would it return in? Would it be smeared with makeup, torn from dancing, spilled on by careless hands in the dark? Each image flashed like a nightmare. And I knew I could not rest until I saw it again. When Beatrice finally walked into my house that evening, she did not carry the gown with reverence or apology. She shoved a plastic shopping bag into my arms, light and crumpled. Inside lay my dress, soaking wet, dripping onto the floor, wrinkled beyond recognition, its satin poisoned with red stains. The smell hit me next. Sharp alcohol, sour and unforgiving. It looked like a body dumped in haste, ruined beyond hope. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to tear the air apart with my rage. Instead, I wept, the tears hot and humiliating. Beatrice's excuses poured out, weak and meaningless. Someone had bumped into her, she said. A drink had spilled. The rip on the hem was an accident. She hadn't known, she swore. But as I stared at the destruction, I knew the truth. She didn't care enough to ask. She didn't care enough to respect what was not hers. And then came the final insult. She dared to roll her eyes and whisper that it was just a dress. That was when I saw Adam's face change. My husband, who had always been patient, who had funded her entire education, who had protected her from every consequence since childhood, he went silent. His silence wasn't weakness. It was fury. Cold, lethal fury. He told her to leave, and as she stood at the doorway sobbing, he announced the sentence that would shift the ground beneath our family forever. "I'm freezing your college fund. Not another dime until you make this right." The words landed like thunder. Beatrice shrieked, saying she didn't have the money, that we were ruining her life. She fled into the night. leaving us holding the corpse of my gown and the weight of betrayal that settled on our chests. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the stains. I heard her casual tone, and above all, I felt the searing question that clawed into me. What do you do when the person you trusted most treats your sacred as disposable? When blood demands forgiveness, but justice demands consequence? I wanted to forgive. Truly, I did. But each time I touched the ruined silk, my heart bled again. And I knew this wasn't just about fabric. This was about boundaries, respect, and the dangerous lie families sometimes tell themselves. That love means never holding each other accountable. That lie had just cost me my gown. And now, it threatened to cost Beatrice her future. As I stared at the crumpled heap on the floor, one thought burned through the tears and the ache. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The night the gown disappeared was the night my family's facade of harmony shattered, and we would all have to choose which side of the fracture to stand on. Blood on white silk. The next morning, I carried the dress to a renowned atelier in the city, the kind of place that whispered of miracles. The master cleaner examined it with steady hands, her face unreadable. She did not speak for several minutes, only lifted each layer of chiffon, pressed each stain beneath the light, and sighed softly in the quiet. When she finally looked at me, I already knew what she was going to say. Red wine is merciless, she told me, especially on silk this delicate. We can try, but even if the stains lighten, the fibers are damaged. It will never be the same. Her words sank into me like stones. Never the same. I had braced myself for bad news, but the confirmation hollowed me out. I signed the paper authorizing them to attempt a restoration, even though I already understood this dress had been lost the moment Beatrice dragged it into that bar. I walked out clutching only the empty bag, my chest tight with grief. Isn't it strange how betrayal can echo louder than the act itself? The ruined gown was terrible, yes, but worse was knowing that the person who caused it still didn't seem to care. She had laughed, she had shrugged, and my mother-in-law Margaret had dared to say, "It's only a dress." Only a dress? How could they not see? This was never about fabric. It was about respect. It was about boundaries. It was about the silent contract of trust we assume within a family, that what is sacred to one will be honored by all. What happens when that contract is broken? What happens when the ones closest to you dismiss your deepest pain as nothing? Ladies and gentlemen, before we dive deeper, let me pause here to say a warm welcome to you all from Dran. If you've been drawn in by this story, if you feel the tension twisting in your chest, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Your support gives us the strength to keep creating these stories. Stories of betrayal, love, family, and redemption that keep us all on the edge of our seats. So please, subscribe now and let's continue. The following days were heavy with silence. Beatrice sent messages that flickered between whining apologies and sharp accusations. "I didn't know it was your wedding dress," she repeated, as if that erased the fact that she had trespassed into my closet without asking. And then, the cruelest jab. "You're overreacting. It's just a gown." Each word carved me raw. I wanted to scream that no, it was not just a gown. It was the gift of my parents, the memory of our wedding, the thread of generations stitched together in love. But Beatrice wasn't listening. She wanted to be forgiven, quickly, cheaply, without cost. And then came the blow that nearly split the family apart. Margaret, my mother-in-law, called me one evening. Her voice was calm at first, even gentle. She said she was sorry this had happened, but almost immediately her sympathy turned to defense. "Beatrice is young," she said. "She truly didn't realize. We all make mistakes. Why can't you forgive her?" Why can't I forgive her? What a question. Do we forgive a thief because they claim they didn't notice the lock? Do we forgive a driver who smashes our car because they were too distracted to look? Forgiveness is earned, not demanded. Yet Margaret seemed blind to that truth. She told me it was unfair to expect repayment because I hadn't spent my own money on the dress. My parents had. She told me it was unreasonable to hold a 19-year-old accountable for thousands of dollars. And then she said the words that made my blood turn to fire. "It's not like you can wear it again, dear." That was the moment my grief ignited into rage. Not wear it again? Did she not understand that some things are meant to be kept, preserved, honored? That meaning isn't measured by utility, but by love. I snapped at her, my voice trembling with fury. It wasn't yours to dismiss. It was mine to protect. But Margaret wasn't listening. She was too busy worrying about her daughter. Beatrice, she said, was terrified that Adam would pull the college fund. She painted Beatrice as a victim, sobbing, hysterical, afraid her future would vanish. And maybe it would. Because Adam was resolute, he had frozen every penny until Beatrice faced what she had done. What do you do when loyalty to your spouse collides with loyalty to your blood? Adam stood firmly beside me, but the family gathered against us. Aunts, cousins, even his own mother accused us of being cruel, of destroying Beatrice's life over a piece of fabric. I began to doubt myself. Was I truly heartless? Was I letting my pain ruin an innocent girl's education? But then I would look again at the dress, lying in its bag, its silk stained and shredded. And I remembered the way Beatrice had smirked, the way Margaret had scoffed, the way everyone demanded I swallow my grief in silence. That was when the doubt turned to steel. No, I would not be made small. I would not pretend my loss was trivial. Each time Beatrice pleaded for forgiveness without offering a solution, each time Margaret asked me to prioritize her daughter's comfort over my own dignity, I felt the truth more strongly. This wasn't only about a ruined dress. This was about teaching Beatrice that life has consequences, that family doesn't mean free passes, that love requires respect. And yet, deep down, there was fear. What if Adam's stance destroyed his relationship with his sister forever? What if the fracture in the family never healed? I lay awake at night, torn between guilt and resolve, wondering what would crack first, Beatrice's pride or our bond as a family. The dress lay in ruins, but the real wreckage was yet to come, because the true test had only just begun, not of silk, but of blood. And I feared that once the battle lines were drawn, there would be no easy way back. So I ask you, what would you have done? Would you forgive quickly to keep the peace? Or would you demand justice, even if it meant tearing your family apart? That question hung over me like a storm cloud, and I knew the storm was about to break. The Family Tribunal. The summons came on a Saturday evening. Margaret called and insisted we come to the family estate. She said it was time to sit down like adults and resolve this nonsense. Her voice was calm, but beneath the calmness, I could hear a command. There was no invitation in her tone. There was expectation, even demand. When Adam and I walked into the drawing room, the air was already heavy. Margaret sat on one side of the room, her husband Philip by her side. And there was Beatrice, eyes swollen from crying, shoulders curled in on themselves. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. The silence stretched until Margaret forced a smile and said, "We are all family here. Let us remember that love must come first." But Adam did not return her smile. He leaned forward, voice low and controlled. Love without accountability is not love at all. Then he turned directly to his sister. "Beatrice, explain to me, how did you think it was acceptable to go into our house and take something without asking?" Beatrice shifted uncomfortably, her hands twisting in her lap. "I thought it was just a dress for costumes. I didn't know. I couldn't contain myself. You were at our wedding, Beatrice. You've seen the photos. You knew exactly what that dress looked like. Don't insult me by pretending you couldn't tell." Her eyes darted away, and for a moment, the mask slipped. She wasn't clueless. She was cornered. Philip exhaled heavily, as if the weight of the argument already exhausted him. "What exactly do you want from her? Money? She doesn't have any." I turned to him, my voice trembling but steady. "At the very least, I want acknowledgement. I want responsibility. And yes, if she has destroyed something irreplaceable, then she must make amends." Margaret cut in, sharp this time. "She is 19. She doesn't have thousands lying around. You are asking for the impossible. Are we really going to ruin her future over this?" And there it was, the heart of the conflict laid bare. Was this about justice? Or about protecting Beatrice from consequence? Adam spoke again, his patience thinning. "The money she doesn't have, I do. I've been paying her tuition from my own savings. Every semester, every book, every expense. If she refuses to take responsibility, then I refuse to fund her education." The room cracked open with tension. Margaret's face drained of color. Philip's jaw tightened. Beatrice gasped as if struck. What do you do when the person who has always saved you suddenly refuses? What do you do when the hand that fed you becomes the hand that withholds? Beatrice burst into tears, wailing that she couldn't possibly repay such a sum, that it wasn't fair, that she hadn't meant to do it. Her apologies blurred with excuses, and the more she spoke, the less sincere they sounded. Margaret rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her. "She is sorry, Adam. Isn't that enough? Must you destroy her education, her future, just to make a point?" But Adam did not flinch. His voice rose for the first time that night. "It isn't about making a point. It's about teaching her that actions have consequences. What would happen if a stranger ruined something worth thousands? Would she accept sorry as payment? Or would she demand restitution?" The question hung in the room like a blade. Beatrice sobbed harder. "I said I was sorry. I didn't know it was such a big deal." And that's when I realized she still didn't understand. She wasn't sorry for the damage. She was sorry for being caught, sorry for the consequences pressing in on her. The argument spiraled, each word cutting deeper. Margaret accused me of turning Adam against his sister. An aunt who had been summoned to mediate shook her head, whispering that families shouldn't fight over material things. Philip tried to play peacemaker, asking whether partial repayment might suffice, but Adam stayed unyielding. Until I see genuine effort, until I see Beatrice trying to make this right, I will not pay another cent for her schooling. Twist after twist ricocheted across the room. Margaret offered to pay for cleaning and a little extra for our trouble. I refused, telling her this was not an inconvenience, it was devastation. Philip suggested spreading repayment over decades, but Adam shot back that responsibility delayed indefinitely is responsibility denied. And then an unexpected silence fell. Beatrice stopped crying. She straightened in her chair, her voice suddenly sharp, almost defiant. "You care more about a dress than about me. I'm your sister. She's just your wife." The words sliced through the air like a blade. I froze. Adam froze. For a moment, I thought he might explode. Instead, his face hardened into something cold, implacable. "Don't you dare," he said quietly. "Don't you dare pit me against my wife. Eleanor is my family. You are too. But if you force me to choose between a sister who destroys and dismisses and a wife who has done nothing but love and trust, then you already know my answer." Beatrice's bravado crumbled. She shrank back into tears, muttering apologies that now sounded desperate, panicked. The shift was small, but I felt it. The cracks in her defense had finally begun to widen. Still, the meeting ended without resolution. We left the estate drained, hearts pounding, ears still echoing with accusations and sobs. Nothing was solved, but something had changed. For the first time, Beatrice had seen that Adam's protection was not unconditional. But as we drove away in silence, one question pressed harder than all the rest. How far was she willing to go to avoid responsibility? Would she change? Or would she double down, dragging the entire family deeper into the storm? And if she refused to bend, what would snap first? Our patience or the fragile ties that held us together? The tribunal had ended, but the trial was only beginning. Shadows of betrayal. It didn't take long for Beatrice to strike back. She had sat silently through the family tribunal, swallowed her brother's fury, absorbed my accusations, and left the room shaking. But silence was never her strong suit. A few days later, the whispers began, not in our living room, but across the glowing screens of social circles, where sympathy could be harvested with half-truths and omissions. Her post was short, almost cryptic, but powerful enough to ignite a fire. When your own brother would rather destroy your education than forgive a mistake, family can be cruel. No details, no context, just the image of a weeping young woman painted as a victim of merciless kin. It spread fast. Friends at her college shared it. Cousins chimed in with messages of outrage. Strangers commented on her bravery for speaking out. Within hours, Adam's phone was buzzing with calls from relatives demanding answers. Some were shocked, others disappointed, a few outright furious. And the story they thought they knew wasn't the truth. It was Beatrice's version, crafted to bleed sympathy and cast us as villains. How do you fight a battle when the world has already chosen its hero and its villain? How do you defend yourself when the narrative is already written in someone else's tears? Adam's anger simmered like molten steel. He rarely touched social media, but that night, his restraint snapped. He replied directly beneath her post. Interesting how you left out the part where you trespassed into our home, stole something priceless, and ruined it beyond repair. Actions have consequences, Beatrice. For one breathless moment, I thought the tide would turn. Surely, those who read his words would pause, would question, would ask for the full story. But before any comment could settle, before any eye could linger long enough to doubt her, Beatrice deleted his reply. Then she blocked him. She blocked me. She cut us off with a digital wall, leaving only her version of events to linger in the minds of everyone watching. The tension in our home was unbearable. I felt exposed, as though the very walls of our life had been stripped away and handed to the gossiping crowd. Adam clenched his fists and swore he wouldn't let her manipulate the truth. Yet beneath his anger, I saw the flicker of pain. This was his sister, the girl he had raised like a daughter, now casting him as the villain in her story. And then came the twist none of us expected. One of our aunts, the very woman who had scolded me weeks before for caring more about a dress than about family, called in tears. She had read the post, yes, but she had also heard the whispers that contradicted it. She asked Adam directly, was it true? Had Beatrice really taken my wedding gown without permission, dragged it to a party, and returned it ruined? Adam told her everything. He spared no detail, no excuse, no attempt to soften the blow. And when he finished, silence filled the line. Then the aunt whispered, we were wrong. We didn't know. She lied to us. Word spread like wildfire, but this time it spread in our favor. Family members who had once accused us of cruelty now turned their anger toward Beatrice. Even her grandmother, the matriarch who had always doted on her, expressed horror at what she'd done. For the first time, Beatrice wasn't surrounded by protectors. She was surrounded by doubt. Isn't it strange how quickly the wind changes when truth is forced into the open? How the same voices that once condemned us now condemned her? But truth carries a cost, and though the tide had shifted, the wound in our family deepened. In the midst of this storm, Margaret called again. Her tone was softer now, almost desperate. She said she and Philip had discussed it, and they could raise some money. Not the full amount, but perhaps half. 4,000 pounds, she offered. Would that be enough to stop all this? Enough to let Adam release her college fund? For a moment, I felt relief. At last, they were acknowledging the weight of what had been done. At last, they were offering something tangible, something more than excuses. But even as she spoke, I knew the truth. This wasn't about justice. This was about damage control. They wanted us quiet. They wanted the scandal to end. I told her I would consider it, but only if Beatrice herself also contributed. She needed to sign a written agreement. She needed to take responsibility. Margaret hesitated, but she agreed. Later that night, an email arrived. Beatrice had written it herself, or perhaps with guidance. But the words were unlike anything she had said before. She admitted she had been selfish, careless, and blind. She admitted she feared losing money more than losing us. She admitted she had lied to others to protect her pride, and that in doing so, she had turned her family against us. For the first time, I felt a shift. Her words were raw, stripped of excuses. She said she would repay us, even if it took years. She said she valued our relationship more than some stupid night of fun. She said she understood now what she had destroyed. It was a fragile hope, but hope nonetheless. Was this the moment she had finally woken up? Or was it another performance, another plea crafted to secure her future? I didn't know. All I knew was that my heart, though still bruised, wanted to believe. And you, what would you have done? Would you have accepted her apology and moved on? Or would you have demanded proof, action, repayment, a contract written in more than words? The storm had reached its peak, the winds battering every corner of our lives. Yet in the eye of that storm, there was a moment of stillness, a glimpse of possibility. Perhaps this was the turning point. Perhaps Beatrice would finally understand. Or perhaps the darkest twist had yet to come. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. It may seem like a small action, but for us, it's a huge encouragement that fuels our passion to bring you even more captivating real-life stories. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to Dran. Your support gives us the strength to keep creating stories filled with betrayal, loyalty, heartbreak, and redemption. Stories that remind us all how fragile and how powerful family can truly be. Because the night was not over. the story was not done. And though hope glimmered in the distance, the shadows had not yet lifted. Ashes of the gown, lessons of blood. The day of reckoning came not with shouting, not with slammed doors, but with paper and ink. Margaret and Philip arrived with Beatrice, their faces pale and worn, as though the weight of the past weeks had aged them. There was no grandeur this time, no attempt to frame the conversation with lofty words about family. They sat, quiet, almost subdued, and placed a folder on our table. Inside was an agreement. £4,000 from the parents, an initial payment to acknowledge the damage, and a promise, Beatrice's promise, to repay the rest piece by piece over the years to come. It wasn't perfection. It didn't erase the pain. But it was something. A beginning. Beatrice signed with trembling hands. When she set the pen down, her eyes lifted to mine, red and raw, and for the first time, she didn't look like the spoiled girl who had barged into my life with reckless entitlement. She looked like a young woman finally staring at the shadow of her choices. "I can't change what I did," she whispered, "but I don't want this to be the end of us. Please believe me. I'll make this right, even if it takes the rest of my life." Her words cracked me open. For weeks I had carried nothing but anger and grief, a burning determination not to let her escape accountability. And now, sitting across from her, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first step toward it. The first faint possibility that trust might, one day, be rebuilt. Adam read the contract, nodded once, and finally spoke. "This isn't about money, Beatrice. It never was. It's about proving to yourself that you can face what you've done. If you do that, I'll release your college fund. But if you break this promise, if you treat this as nothing more than a piece of paper, then you'll know what it means to lose more than money." The air was still. Margaret dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Philip muttered something about relief. And Beatrice nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, her signature still wet on the page. Isn't it strange how resolution often comes not in the thunder of battle, but in the quiet scratch of a pen? Isn't it strange how something so fragile, paper, ink, a signature, can carry the weight of betrayal, responsibility, and the possibility of redemption? That night after they left, Adam and I sat together in silence. The dress lay upstairs, ruined forever, folded neatly in its bag. I touched it once more, my fingers brushing the faint stains that no cleaner could erase. And for the first time, I didn't weep. I simply breathed, acknowledging what was lost, but also what had been won. The gown would never be worn again. It would never be the pristine heirloom my mother and grandmother had dreamed of passing down. But its destruction had forced a reckoning our family had long avoided. It had forced us to confront what love truly means. Love is not indulgence. Love is not blind forgiveness. Love is the courage to say no, even when it hurts. Love is the strength to hold someone accountable, not because you wish to harm them, but because you wish for them to grow. And perhaps that was the gift the ruined gown left behind. Not the lace, not the silk, not the memory of my wedding day, but the lesson that family without respect is fragile, and family with accountability can, maybe, endure anything. Weeks later, Beatrice wrote me again. Not to ask for anything, not to excuse herself, but simply to tell me about her first job at a cafe near campus. She had taken it on her own, she said, to begin making her payments. The wages were small, but the act was larger than money. It was proof that she had begun to change. And in that moment, I felt something loosen in me. A thread of anger snapped free, leaving behind not forgiveness, but hope. Hope that this time, her words were not empty. Hope that from the ashes of that gown, something stronger might be woven between us. When I look back now, I realize the story was never truly about a dress. It was about the moment the illusion of harmony cracked and the truth came rushing through. It was about the moment we discovered whether love could survive the weight of betrayal. And for all the nights I cried, for all the hours Adam raged, for all the voices of relatives who scolded or doubted us, this ending feels right. Not neat, not clean, but right. Because life rarely gives us clean endings. It gives us scars. And those scars, if we choose, can remind us not of weakness, but of resilience. So I ask you, listening now, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven immediately, smoothed the conflict away for the sake of peace? Or would you have stood your ground, demanded accountability, and risked the fracture of family to defend your own dignity. Whatever your answer, I hope this story leaves you with this truth. We cannot control whether others betray us, but we can control how we respond. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to let love become a shield for irresponsibility. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to demand more, and in doing so, offer a chance, not for escape, but for redemption. The gown is gone, but the lesson remains, and maybe that is enough. When I look back on everything that unfolded, the stolen gown, the endless tears, the public humiliation, the contracts written in ink and shame, it is clear this was never just about fabric or money. It was about what happens when trust is broken in the very place we expect it to be safest. Our family. Betrayal is sharpest when it comes from within our own walls. And yet, even in that pain, there is room for something greater. The gown could not be restored. Its stains remain, a permanent reminder of that night. But sometimes, life teaches us that restoration is not about reversing damage. It is about what we do with the damage. The torn silk became the mirror that forced everyone to see the truth. That love without respect is fragile. That forgiveness without accountability is empty. And that family bonds, however sacred, cannot survive without honesty. It is easy to confuse love with indulgence, to believe that protecting someone means shielding them from consequence. But true love, the kind that lasts, the kind that heals, requires courage. It demands that we say, I love you too much to let you stay small. I love you too much to let you harm and walk away untouched. That is the paradox of love. It is both tender and firm, both forgiving and uncompromising. So what can we take from this into our own lives today? Maybe you have faced betrayal, perhaps not with a gown, but with a friend who borrowed your trust and returned it broken, a colleague who crossed a line, or a relative who dismissed your pain. The lesson here is not simply to harden your heart, nor is it to forgive blindly. The lesson is balance. Hold people accountable, but leave room for growth. Demand respect, but do not close the door to redemption. Stand firm in your dignity, but do not let bitterness define you. In a world where it is easier to scroll past pain, to sweep conflict under the rug, or to let resentment fester in silence, choose a harder path. Speak the truth, hold the line, and allow those who have wronged you the chance to rise to the occasion. Not all will, but some will surprise you. And in those moments, something stronger than forgiveness can take root: transformation. If this story has stirred something in you, I invite you to join our community at DRAN. There, you'll find more stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us that life's deepest lessons are often written in the scars we carry. Don't miss what comes next. Subscribe to the channel today and be part of a journey that explores betrayal, resilience, and the hope that always waits on the other side.